Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of FPL Fanzone. My name's Nick and in today's episode we are going to look at an updated chip strategy for now and the rest of the season. The reason behind the updated video is because the Premier League have just dropped another huge announcement for Double Game Week 32, which, looking at the experts, was not even predicted to be a double game week. So this now of course changes all of the potentials for future game weeks, doubles and blanks. We've also got updates on who's going to blank in game week 29. We now know who's doubling in 32, and we've got a little bit more visibility over game week 34 as well. On top of that, we're going to have a quick review of all of the chips that are available in the game, and I'm going to rank them based on my experience with them as well. We're going to have a look at how the League Cup and FA Cup are going to continue to impact fixtures changes over the rest of the season as well. And then lastly, we're going to have a look at the chip strategies available for whatever remaining chips that you have left as well. If you do get value from this video, please do hit the like button, leave a comment below if you've got any questions, and I'll try and get through those as much as I can. Hit that notification bell if you want updates on any future announcements for double game weeks, blank game weeks, or any other changes in potential strategies that some of the other content creators and experts are doing as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So first up, let's have a quick look at all of the chips that are available in the game. Of course, some of us have already started to use some of these chips, so not all of them now available to everyone between now and the end of the season. But what I've done here is I've added in a new column from the last video, chip strategy video, which in my mind explains a little bit more where the value lies for each of these chips. So first and foremost, the Wildcard. We already had one of these in the first half of the season. Some of us still have one available now for the second half of the season. So you get two of these a season, and in my mind they're the most important chip in the game because you can get to change your whole team, make unlimited transfers in one game week, but those transfers are permanent. So you can really set yourself up for fixture swings. You can set yourself up if you're looking towards potentially pairing it with a bench boost, in the coming weeks. It's just such a powerful chip in terms of being able to completely change your team and move it, whether it's injuries, whether it's fixture swings, whatever that may be. Next up, and surprisingly for me, when I looked at the numbers, is actually the free hit is an incredibly powerful chip because it impacts the whole team. Now, it only does it for one game week, but if you do it on a double game week, for example, there's potentially 22 games, because obviously only 11 will play. So there's 22 games that you could impact with one chip. That's massive. Now, a lot of people use the free hit in a blank game week. I did it last year and it was terrible. People used it in the double last year and it was fantastic for that particular reason. So I'm just starting to change my thought process around that free hit chip. Should I be using it in a blank? Which of course allows you to keep your stronger team for a longer period of time. Just use the free hit in the blank, and obviously it mitigates some of the loss. But the potential of 22 players all doubling in 1 week, 11 players doubling for 22 games in 1 week, just feels way too strong. So starting to change my mind there, which is why it's second on this list. The next up, if you look at the number of games that are impacted, is the bench boost. Now, it only lasts for 1 week, but it does impact 4 players. Obviously, it's the 4 players on your bench all score points for that game week. Now, if that's a double game week and all of those 4 players are doubling, that's 8 potential extra. There's an extra 4 games or 8 games in 1 week. So therefore, there's a huge potential there. Now, typically what you find with your bench boost is that the players on your bench aren't as strong. So there is an opportunity here where you're getting double with players from weaker teams. So it's not always as powerful. And for example, if you're combining your wildcard the week before the week you're going to bench boost, you could potentially have all 15 players doubling for the week, which is why a lot of people think the bench boost is more powerful than the free hit. But actually what the bench boost is only doing is doubling potentially 4 players on that as well, and typically they're your weaker players as well. So if you combine the wild card the week before the bench boost, then of course it gives it significant more value moving forward. The next up is then the assistant manager chip, and this one has huge points potential. Now, it obviously gives you an extra player or an extra points avenue in terms of your manager for those, but it lasts for 3 weeks. Now, of course, this season we've got a double-double and potentially 2 double-doubles, so we could get potentially 5 games from that manager instead of the 3. But obviously, if you could get double, then there is the potential, and it's very unlikely, but to get 6 games from your manager. So therefore, it's a little bit less than the bench boost in terms of the number of games, but the points value there is significantly higher, especially if you can manage to get table bonus. Now, table bonus isn't as easy as it looks, and the fixtures are, actually, if we look through the different fixtures, there's not as many table bonus opportunities that at least look good. A lot of the time you'll be playing your bottom 3 or bottom 4 teams against teams that are significantly higher in the league. And because the middle of the table is so tight, a lot of those mid-table fixtures are, the only way to get the table bonus is if you're playing a team that's in the top 4, and typically they're in a good run of form, otherwise they wouldn't be there. So the bonus points make this chip massive, but I just think overall it's a little bit less impactful than the other ones above. And then lastly, the triple captain. Now, this only impacts 1 player for 1 game week, so really the maximum that you can get is 2 games out of this. Now, of course, doing it on someone like Salah, who's been out of this world this season, and obviously he got 29 points in the last double in game week 24. Of course, there's huge potential for it, but for me, it's the weakest chip on this list. So let me know in the comments below. What's your thoughts? I'm really sort of struggling with myself at the moment with free hit. Do I use it in a blank game week? And of course, there are lots of variables there around having a stronger team before that blank without having to use all of your transfers, but also just the potential of having 22 or having 11 doublers in 1 game week seems really, really powerful as well. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Okay, so next up, let's have a look at the predicted doubles and blanks. Now, we know that confirmed blanks in game week 29. We know there is a confirmed double in game week 32, which was just announced yesterday. So in game week 29, we know that the League Cup final is taking place. Therefore, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Newcastle and Crystal Palace will not play in game week 29. So already start to think about what you're doing with your team. How many of those players from those teams do you already have in your team, and how are you going to manage game week 29 with those 4 teams not playing? So personally, if you look at my team, I've got 2 Villa, 3 Liverpool currently, and 1 Newcastle now. So for me, I've got 7 players. So I really need to lose at least 4 of those if I'm going to put out a full team. So it's tough. I need to have a look at what I'm going to do there. Potentially, obviously, free hit does allow me to just change the team up for that week and bring in a whole new team for that as well. But start to think about what you're doing for game week 29. Then, of course, we got the announcement before the game week 25 deadline that the Newcastle Crystal Palace game has been rescheduled to game week 32. Now, this was a bit of a surprise. We did think this was going to be in game week 33, just because that in the midweek of game week 32, there are Champions League games and Europe games. Now, neither Newcastle or Crystal Palace are in Europe, so therefore it's a free midweek for those guys. But typically, the Premier League has not put Premier League games on to clash with European games. So this year, that's a bit of a change. So that may change how fixtures are moved. And if you look at people like Ben Crellin, for example, who do amazing spreadsheets on predicted fixtures and updates, and it's going to make his job a little bit harder this year because they're now changing the rules on when they will play those games. So double game week 32, we know Newcastle and Crystal Palace are going to play. And obviously we know that already that the Liverpool-Aston Villa game has been moved to this week at game week 25. Next up, we then predict that game week 33 is going to be the double. Now, what we think here is that the semi-finals of the FA Cup, which are going to clash with game week 34, will be brought forward and played in game week 33, because there's no European games, there's a blank midweek available. So we think that those game week 34 games will be brought forward, and we'll have a look at who those teams are and what that could potentially mean moving forward. But there is, of course, the opportunity to move those games later to double game week 36. So we don't know whether the blank games in game week 34 are going to be moved forward to game week 33 or backwards to game week 36. Now, typically the Premier League like to bring the games forward because it gives them more options to make any changes later on if unforeseen things happen, like the Queen dying or coronavirus or bad weather conditions like we've seen already this year. So typically they bring the games forward, so we do expect that the bigger double will now be in game week 33 for that as well. So what does that mean for our teams and how are the fixtures impacted? Let's take a quick look. So as we've already discussed, the League Cup final is in game week 29, and the fixtures have now been updated in the app and on the web. So you'll know that Aston Villa Liverpool are playing in this game week 25, and then the Newcastle Crystal Palace game will not play in 29 and will now play in game week 32. So obviously those four teams will not play in game week 29. So just keep that in mind when you start to think about your chip strategy. The more complicated part is the FA Cup and how that's going to impact future weeks. First and foremost, we don't know when these games are going to be replayed. So we know right now that the semi-final of the FA Cup is clashing with game week 34. So it's on the same dates. So teams that are playing in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, and we don't know who they are yet, we only just completed the fourth round, so we've still got two more rounds to go till we know for certain who's going to be in that semi-final. But what I've got here is, if you look at the game week 34 fixtures and the colour coding that we've got here, so the teams, first and foremost, let's have the teams in green. So Chelsea, Everton, Liverpool and Spurs have all been knocked out of the FA Cup. We saw that in the fourth round this week, so there was some surprises there with Liverpool losing to Plymouth Argyle, which was very, very unexpected. Therefore, we know that the Chelsea, Everton and the Liverpool Spurs game will play in game week 34. So right now, that's really good for me because I've got 2 Everton, 1 Chelsea and three Liverpool in my team. So I've got, what's that, 6 players that are already playing in that blank game week. That makes it a little bit easier for me to manage. Now, obviously, this is 9 game weeks away, so there's a lot going to happen between now and then. But those 2 fixtures are confirmed. Those 4 teams will be playing. Now we know that the next round of the FA Cup is the 5th round, will be taking place just before the end of game week 28. Now, those fixtures won't impact. They'll be separate. The FA Cup will be on the weekend. The Premier League will be in the midweek, so they won't impact. There won't be any doubles there or blanks there. But what we know, for example, is that in the 5th round, we've got 4 ties that are all Premier League ties. And this means that at least 4 teams, Premier League teams, are going to be knocked out. Now, there are other Premier League teams playing lower league teams, so we do expect them to go through. Of course, there are FA Cup shocks and everything else, but we do expect those teams to go through. But if we look at these all Premier League ties in the FA Cup, we know that either Bournemouth or Wolves will get knocked out in the 5th round. And that, of course, will then impact which teams could potentially play in game week 34. So, for example, if Wolves get out, because Leicester are already out, Wolves and Leicester game would then be confirmed for game week 34. Obviously, if Bournemouth get knocked out, Man United are potentially still in, and therefore they would need Man United to be knocked out, and then those games would still be off on that as well. And then again, if we look at the Newcastle-Brighton one, so if Newcastle get knocked out, Ipswich are still in the FA Cup, so they could potentially, that game could still be off. Whereas if Brighton get knocked out, West Ham are already out, so the Brighton-West Ham game would then be confirmed. I'm hoping this makes a lot of sense. It is very, very confusing, and my brain has been exploding all morning trying to understand this and look at the different permutations. Let's have a quick look at Manchester United and Fulham. if Manchester United get knocked out, obviously Bournemouth in. So you could see that Bournemouth and Man United get knocked out, and therefore that fixture would then be on if both of those happen. And then, of course, if Fulham get knocked out, that would mean that the Fulham-Southampton game would then be on in game week 34. And then last of the ones is Nottingham Forest-Ipswich. So if Ipswich get knocked out, which is the most likely one, Newcastle are still in, unless Newcastle lose to Brighton. And then if Nottingham Forest get knocked out, then you'd have Nottingham Forest-Brentford that would play. And again, that would make it a lot easier for teams. For people that have got Chris Wood, maybe they've got Aina still, or maybe they've got Mbremo or Vissa in their team. So it could potentially make game week 34 really easy if some of those bigger teams that we've all got players from have their fixtures on. Now, of course, this is only the 5th round. The quarterfinals don't take place until the end of game week 29, which is the blank game week currently. So once we get to game week 30, we will know, so at the start of game week 30, before game week 30 deadline, we will know for certain who is going to play and who is not going to play in game week 34. Then it's just dependent on whether the Premier League announce that those fixtures will be played in game weeks 33 or game weeks 36, or whether they just throw the book out and put it in somewhere else. We do think it's going to be a little bit harder for them to match those fixtures elsewhere in the season. So right now, we will know game week 34 confirmed by game week 30, and then the doubles for game weeks 33 or 36 will be dependent on a Premier League announcement, and we do expect that to be either in game week 30 or game week 31. So just bear that in mind. Apologies if that's really confusing. Let me know if you've got any questions in the comments below. Also, if you got some value from that, if you did understand my rambling, please hit that like button, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and hit the notification bells, because I will give you updates as and when these fixtures happen, so we'll get a clearer picture of what's going to happen later on in the season. So what do we already know? Just taking away all of the permutations for future game weeks, what do we already know? So in game week 25, we know that Liverpool and Aston Villa both have doubles. That's fantastic. We know that in game week 29, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Newcastle and Crystal Palace will not play. So there will be no games for any of those teams or any of those players from those teams in game week 29. In game week 32, we know that Newcastle will have a double and that Crystal Palace will have a double for that. So that's great. Game week 33, we don't know who is doubling, or even if it is a double yet, we just predict that that will be the double. And then currently in game week 34, the only confirmed fixtures that we know that are playing, we don't know who the blanks are yet, is Liverpool versus Spurs and Chelsea versus Everton. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. The other thing here as well is that, and it's not been talked a lot, is that the FA Cup final is actually in game week 37. So it's happening before the end of the season. Now, there is a midweek option available there for whoever's in that final potentially to play. But if, for example, it's someone who's still in Europe, that could potentially be moved to game week 36. So there could potentially be a blank for the teams that reach the final. Now, that's not been confirmed. We do expect it to not clash with the Premier League, but there is something just to take into consideration that there might be two teams that blank in game week 37 as well. So this is what we know right now. Let's see what that means for our teams and our chip strategy. So here is the updated chip strategy for depending on what chips you have available left. Now, for example, I am already using my assistant manager. I started it in game week 24, so it's going to run in game week 25 and game week 26 because it lasts for 3 weeks. For those that haven't used their assistant manager, it makes sense to really use your triple captain on Salah for game week 25. I know the deadline has already passed, but as Liverpool are unlikely to double again later on in the season because they're already out of the FA Cup, as is their opponents, we don't expect them to get a second double, and Salah is by far the best player in the game. So hopefully, if you've not used any of your chips, you are on your triple captain Salah this week. Obviously, a lot of managers have looked at potentially going to the assistant manager chip. But of course, there is, with the Game Week 32 double, that does allow people to potentially look at getting double again for their assistant manager. So in Game Week 32 and Game Week 33, there'll be 2 assistant manager chips there as well. Personally, for me, right now, I don't know how I navigate Game Week 29. So as I'm in option 2, having used the assistant manager in Game Week 24, my options are to either try and navigate using free transfers so that I can just get out a full team in Game Week 29, or I can free hit in Game Week 29. So use the free hit, keep my team as it is, obviously keep my Newcastle players that are going to have a strong run of fixtures afterwards. We know that they've got the double in Game Week 32 and could potentially also double again in Game Week 33. The other option is to use my free transfers and then wildcard after the Game Week 29. So once we know those confirmed doubles to either 33 or 36, we could use the wildcard in Game Week 30 or 31, depending, of course, on when the Premier League make that announcement. That would then mean potentially that we could use the chips, my triple captain, which I still have, on Isak in Game Week 32. Isak is probably the second best player outside of maybe Chris Wood, who I think he's got more points than him at the moment due to his hat-trick. But Isak would have, we know that he's got a double in Game Week 32. And it looked at that moment, there's only 1 double in that week, so it's the best time to use the triple captain for that as well. And then what I would look at is potentially bench boosting in Game Week 33, because we expect there to be a lot more doubles there. Using my wildcard, so I'd have a team set up so that I would have, as many doublers as possible for Game Week 33, and then manage Game Week 34, and then carry on and for the rest of the season. Now the option, of course, is depending on when that big double comes, is whether I use the bench boost in 33 or 36. The other option for me that I'm really thinking about and taking consideration is that potentially using the free hit in the double. So using my brain, and I've not fully engaged how this would work, is that in Game Week 30 or 31, I would wildcard my team so that it incorporated enough of the players from Game Week 34 that I could manage it with transfers. In Game Week 33, when we expect there to be the big double, I'll use my free hit, knowing then that I'll have 11 players that all double for that week. But no, also because I don't necessarily have to have them all on my wild cards, and that a lot of them will blank in Game Week 34, I could have a team set up with players already from 34, depending on which teams are there. So we know, for example, that Liverpool are in 34, Chelsea are in 34, Spurs are in 34, Everton are in 34. There could also potentially be Nottingham Forest in 34 and Brentford as well, if Nottingham Forest get knocked out in the next 2 rounds. So that would make it very easy to pick a really strong team for the rest of the season using players from strong teams, and then therefore take advantage of doing it the other way round from everyone else, of having my because I've already got a team that's built for Game Week 34 with strong players, I could use my bench boost there, or potentially just use the bench boost if there is a double in 36 as well. So it is interesting. There's a lot to think about here. Look at the permutations on the screen. Let me know if you have any questions. Which route are you going? Are you on option 1, option 2, option 3 on that? And of course, the main change there is where you're playing your assistant manager chip. Most likely now the best value for your assistant manager chip will be the double, so using it from Game Week 31 to Game Week 33. Of course, there is the option to use it at the back end of the season from Game Week 35, 6 and 7, or 36, 37, 38. And what you could be doing there is potentially chasing table bonus with teams that are trying to avoid relegation versus teams that are maybe already mid-table and are safe. So there's the potential to use your assistant manager chip at the real back end of the season, but the potential double could be a lot better option if you're looking at option 1. Let me know in the comments below what you're doing with your strategy. I will obviously talk about this in my videos coming up as well, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell for updates on when future videos come out, and I'll see you in the next video. So once again, big thank you for watching FPL Fanzone. Please don't forget to hit like if you've got this far into the video and survived all of my ramblings. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Don't forget to join the FPL Fanzone mini league. It's free to join, and there is a Premier League shirt available to the winner, Premier League shirt of your choice available to the winner, and I'll leave the comments and code in the comments below. Thanks again, and may all of your arrows be green.